Hi, it's Faith and Literacy here, and in a previous video I discussed what it means to be a proficient reader, how it takes two things, word recognition as well as language comprehension. And in this video, I want to focus on the language comprehension strand, and I want to talk about what are the 5 parts of language comprehension and how do they work together to help your child or your student become proficient readers. So one of the strands is background knowledge. So background knowledge is what does your student or your child already know about this topic? What are their experiences? What are they coming to the table with? And so if you want to start a unit on sports or maybe baseball in particular, what does that child already know about the sport of baseball? You might have some children who are part of a Little League team, and so they really have in-depth knowledge of the sport as well as some of those vocabulary words that might appear in the story like innings or catcher, pitcher. You might have some students that go to regular baseball games with their family, and so they're familiar with the sport and what happens. And then you might have kids that just like to toss around a ball in their backyard or on the sidewalk near their house. And there might be even kids that have no knowledge of the sport of baseball. So what you want to do is to make sure that you build the student's background knowledge. So that might mean coming in with tangible objects like a glove, a bat, and a ball, having them touch and feel it and try it on, maybe even going outside with the class and tossing it around a little bit. Explaining to them what these objects are, how they're related to baseball, and give them that extra knowledge of the sport. Now, you might also want to show them a short clip of a baseball game, so they have a feeling of what it is to be a professional baseball player. Now, after background knowledge comes vocabulary knowledge. So before you start a unit or before you start a story or a lesson, you always want to go through to make sure that you're looking and picking out vocabulary words that your students might not be familiar with. And you want to make sure that you're going over those words before you introduce a unit or start a lesson or read a story. And for those kids that might not have the background knowledge of, again, baseball in particular, you want to help them develop that vocabulary. So introduce them to words that are baseball jargon, like pitcher, strike, innings, catcher, bases. Again, you can do this by not only introducing the word and its meaning, but also, especially for older kids, look at the etymology of the word, right? Where does it come from? How can we break it down? You might look at the use of compound words like baseball and what does that actually mean if they're separate and how when they come together, they have a different meaning. So you want to play around with the vocabulary and make sure that they have that vocabulary and the background knowledge before delving into a story or delving into a particular lesson or unit. Now, another part is language structure. This is the written syntax, sentence structure, and text structure of the book, article, or text. So this is where grammar comes into play. So you want to make sure that your children understand the parts of speech and that each one of them has a particular job that they play in the English language and in forming an English sentence. You also want to look at various punctuation because punctuation in English plays an important role as well. For example, if there's a sentence with an exclamation point, even when you're reading the sentence, the students can listen and hear that your voice has a certain intonation to it that really shows happiness, excitement, or emotion when you're reading that particular sentence, or how we pause when there's commas. We want to make sure that students understand what quotation marks are and how they play a role in stories. So when they notice it, they know, oh, these are 2 or more characters that are engaged in communication or dialogue, or maybe the character is having a dialogue within themselves. So language structure, vocabulary knowledge, and background knowledge all play a very important part in helping to really build a picture of meaning for your child as they're reading. But there are two more parts. The next part is verbal reasoning. Verbal reasoning is really being able to put all that learning into words and explain your answers. It's being able to make inferences. So, for example, if you're reading and you see words like moon, stars, or the street was lined with lit street lamps, without even knowing or the words saying that it's dark, we can infer that it is, because we're using our vocabulary knowledge as well as our background knowledge to know that when we see words like stars and moon and that there are street lights lining and lit down the streets, that it's dark out. And so we're making connections. We're making connections and understanding what's going on in a story, even though it doesn't actually tell us some pieces of information. We're able to use our vocabulary knowledge, our background knowledge in order to make certain inferences. Verbal reasoning also helps us with being able to compare and contrast. Compare and contrast characters, events, authors, stories, and ideas. Combining ideas together, verbalizing your thinking. And last but not least, literacy knowledge. Literacy knowledge is really understanding the organizational differences and the purposes that exist with text. So, for example, is it a fiction or nonfiction story? What are certain elements that authors use within those two types of stories? So, for example, if it's expository or nonfiction, being able to understand and know the purposes of headings and captions and other organizational features and how that helps you to get a deeper understanding of the article or of the text that you're reading. Also understanding the author's purpose. Why are they writing this piece? Is it for entertainment or is it for informational purposes? And what tools are the author using in the text in order to help us understand his purpose? Literacy knowledge also comprises of sequence and compare and contrast, cause and effect, problem and solution. So all 5 of these areas, literacy knowledge, verbal reasoning, language structure, vocabulary knowledge, and background knowledge, play an important role in helping the child to understand the text better. And I hope you understood a little better too. Thank you so much. Check out faithandliteracy.com for all your literacy needs to help your kids practice these important literacy skills. Catch you later.